Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Raw and Honest. Look, you could just see that little gray hair just poking up like that. Okay, well, here we are, and I am going to tell you a little bit more about my testimony. I started with the first 23 years last time, and so today I'm just going to finish that off. And the only reason I'm doing this is that I feel that it's important for you to understand a few things about me, that you know a little bit about me, and that you understand that I'm not just talking out of my hat when it comes to this stuff, but I'm here discussing what is real to me as well, what I've gone through, what I've healed from, how the Lord has led me through my life, how He's spoken to me, how He speaks to me still, so that it'll encourage you that you don't have to stay in the place where you were, but you can grow forward and you become all that it is He's created you to be. So as you can see, I'm getting ready for hockey. Yay, Leon Draisaitl, the Deutschland Dangler. Not that he's really a dangler, but it's a shirt I saw and I thought, oh, that's cute. So go Oilers, go Leon, go McDavid, go, let's go. Looking forward to hockey starting. So let's go back to when I was 23 years old. I don't remember all that I had finished off by saying, but I got saved in a very dramatic way. My life was completely changed and completely altered. I stopped drinking. I stopped doing drugs. I stopped doing a lot of things. Right? I didn't go to the bar. I stopped. I started to cut off different friends and things like that because I just felt like they weren't beneficial to me. But at the same time, the Lord told me with my boyfriend, He told me that I was to break up with him because it was immoral and it displeased Him. And so, not even really understanding the fullness of what God was saying because I didn't have any idea what being immoral meant in the Christian sense. Like, what does that mean? I didn't know, I didn't understand. But I went to my boyfriend and I said to him, hey, I got saved and, I know, it was almost my birthday. I didn't realize that he had bought me a nice ring for my birthday. I don't think it was an engagement ring, but it was definitely like a promise ring kind of a thing. And so I was like, hey, I got to let you know that I got to break up with you because, I got saved and the Lord has said to me that our relationship is immoral and it displeases Him. And so we broke up. And that was it. And I went my way and he went his, and that was it. And, he did get married to someone else later on. And I wish him well. I wish him the best. Honestly, we had a great friendship and we had a good time together. And so there's no bad feelings, no hard feelings. I hope he has none toward me, but or toward the Lord for the way that I broke up with him. But I ended up in this situation now where I'm 23 years old. I had come out of this bad relationship, then I was in a decent relationship, and now I'm saved, I'm born again, totally transformed, Saul on the road to Damascus kind of experience. And what do I do now? So I began to go to church and I poured my everything into Jesus. I couldn't wait till I got home and I could lay myself out on the floor in His presence and seek His face and wait for Him to come and speak to me. And speak to me He did. And I've heard the voice of the Lord. I saw things in the Spirit, and it was amazing. It was a wonderful time. And I think, I just expected a few things at that time. I expected that everybody did that. I didn't realize that not everybody heard from the Lord in the way that I heard from Him. I didn't realize that not everybody saw things in the Spirit the way that I saw them. There was a lot of things that I didn't know um, that was a gift, a call that God had placed on my life. And so I went to this church for about a year and a half in this small little town in Maple Creek, Saskatchewan, and I served the Lord. My life was dramatically transformed. I was asked to um, do a few things very, very early on. And because of my past, I was terrified to do anything publicly. I didn't want to speak. I didn't want to pray. I didn't want to lead worship. I didn't want to do anything publicly. I was good to be in the background. I was good to hide myself at home on my face before the Lord. But the Lord began to ask me to do things, and I got asked to, do a devotional at a woman's ministry meeting. I declined out of terror, um, and I didn't do it. And I was asked to do that a few times, terrified to do it, wouldn't do it. First of all, I didn't know what a devotional was. I was asked to do a devotional. I'm like, I don't even know what that is, and I don't know how to do it, and I don't know what you're asking. And so I said no. And I think it's important for me at this point in time to say that, I've always been a writer. And I think my entire family kind of carries that ability to write. All of my siblings, we can all write, tell a good story. We know how to put words on a page. Maybe I should say that. I don't do fiction, but I have a brother who writes fiction, and he's very good at it. So, I had in school in those days, they had these competitions where you write something either from Remembrance Day or some other day or whatever it is. And then it goes before the school. And if you're chosen, then it'll go to, you have to do it before the community. And then after the community, then it goes to the province. And after the province, it goes to, to Canada. It goes to the whole of the country. And so I had written something. I don't even remember what it was now. And I was chosen from my class, and then I was chosen before the community, and then chosen in the provincials, and then chosen, right? And so anyway, I don't think I was chosen beyond that, and I'll tell you why. Because at the provincials, I think what happened to me is I got up and I began to speak, and all the parents were there, and there was people there, and I got nervous, and we had to write our speech on cards. And so I'd written my speech, what it was I was going to say, and I dropped them. I dropped my cards, and I hadn't numbered them, and they fell on the floor, and they were all out of order, and they were upside down and backwards. And I was next. I had been called, and I dropped my cards, and I went up and I began to speak. And when I did that, because my cards were all over the place and out of order and everything, I didn't go any further than that. Let's just say that. But it terrified me to ever have to do that again. And so I'm like, I'm not doing that. No, that was a one-time deal. And so when the Lord began to open these doors for me, I was terrified to do so. And, you know, I just kept turning everything down. And then, I found myself leading worship, and that was okay. I could close my eyes and I could pretend that there was nobody there, and I could worship the Lord, and that was fine. After I worked myself through it, and then I was asked to do pray for the offering publicly on a Sunday morning. That was terrifying. And then I was asked to do a Bible study, and to lead a Bible study, and I did, and that was terrifying. Because here I am, and I don't know anything, and I'm teaching people who've been Christians for much longer than I am, and I'm like, what the heck, right? Like, I didn't understand, because I didn't think there was anything special going on. I didn't understand that the way that God was speaking to me was something that other people wanted to hear. And then I was asked to speak and to give my testimony at A Woman's Aglow, which I did, and that began the speaking portion of my life. And I was absolutely terrified when I stood up in this Women's Aglow meeting where there was easily 50 to 60 women that were there. And I was so scared. My kneecaps were going up and down on my knees like this, and I was afraid to move because I thought if I moved, I'd fall over. But I did. I gave my testimony, and I had prayed. I'd heard them ask me, and I said I'd pray about it, and I said, Lord, I don't want to do this. And then one night the Lord woke me up, like he literally woke me up, and he said to read Revelation chapter 12. And so I did, and it says, that you will overcome them by the word, by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of your testimony. And I'm like, maybe you didn't understand, but I don't really want to do this, but I knew I had to, so I did, and we're here. And although I'm more comfortable with it now, I'm willing to do whatever it is that the Lord asks me to do. And so I was doing these things and living my life for the Lord when an old boyfriend came into the picture, and he was a guy that I had met when I was in Calgary. And I was driving through Calgary to go to Banff, and I heard the Lord say this, and it was in my right ear, and he said, "Don't go. I have something better for you here." And I said, and I'm driving through Calgary, and I said, like what? And he said, like James. And I said, oh, that can't be God, right? Because he's not a believer, and so nope, that can't be God. And so I continued on to Banff. And when I came back, I went to go have coffee with a friend of mine who was instrumental in my becoming a Christian, because she was continually speaking to me. She was the one that went to the bar with me and talked to me about the Lord while I was sitting there and drinking. And, she was just instrumental. So I went to go have coffee with her, and we went back to the Sheraton Cavalier where we were going to meet up with another friend of mine. And she said, "Don't worry, James is no longer at the hotel." And I said, "Okay, great." And so we walked in, and immediately the first person that I see is James, and he's back at the front desk. And I'm like, okay, great. And she said, "Now, I didn't plan this. I didn't know he was back." And I'm like, "Okay, great." So here I am, and he asked me to go on a date. And so I read him the riot act, and I tell him I'm born again, things are different. And we start talking, and there was no dating in the beginning. It was just conversation, long late night talks. He ends up giving his life to the Lord. And the Lord had told me 3 times audibly to marry him. And so we got married, and that was basically that part there. And then, I got pregnant fairly quickly after we got married. Within the first year, I got pregnant, and we had Joel. And then I had 2 miscarriages. And it was during the time that I had these 2 miscarriages, the second miscarriage, that my heart was absolutely broken for what had happened. And as I'm laying there in the hospital after the DNC, and I'm just broken, I hear this voice say to me that the reason that this happened to me was because I had been sexually abused. And I went, that doesn't make any sense, because that's not the God that I serve. Like, my God's not going to punish me because I was sexually abused. So this voice is not God. And I knew it wasn't God. And so I'm like, okay, so what do I do with this now? And so I rejected it. And I said to the Lord, okay, God, I recognize that this is not your voice. And so, but you want me to deal with this in my life and to start to bring the healing into my heart that needs to happen. And so if you provide an opportunity or a ministry or something where I can go and get healing, I will do it. And so I think I took a Sunday off, and the Sunday after that, I went back to church, and there was a woman standing at the front of our church, and her name was Cheryl Shea, and she had a ministry in Edmonton called the Mars Hill Center, and she was telling us that she was going to be running a group in our church for inner healing, for recovery from childhood sexual abuse. And I was like, oh, I guess God heard me. So I went in, I took the course, and I did it twice, and I had individual counseling, and I was broken. And it was like I had all of my nerves on the outside of my body. It was a very difficult time. I struggled through that period of time, but I went after the Lord for my healing, for my wholeness, so that I could move forward and be a better person than what I had been, that I could be a better mother, that I could be a better wife, that I could be, just more caring, more giving, not as reserved, not as self-protective. And so that began to happen. And immediately after I was done all of that, I got pregnant for the 4th time. And I was like, okay, so I was terrified I was going to lose this baby. I had a condition. I don't remember the name of it, the clinical name of it. But basically what happened is that the umbilical cord would thicken, and it would starve the baby, and the baby would die. And so the doctor had already told me that she had no idea why this kept happening, but that I probably wouldn't be able to have any more children. And so when I got pregnant, this fourth time, I was pretty afraid and fairly devastated about 3.5 months in when I started spotting again. And I thought, here we go again. I'm going to lose this baby. And I can't keep doing this. So I began to pray and I began to seek the Lord and I began to cry out to him that he would save this baby. And I carried the baby. I was about 6.5 months pregnant when I started contracting one day. And so I didn't realize I had a severe backache and I had no idea why. And so my husband took me in to the hospital and they said that I was in labor and I was 2 centimeters dilated. And so I was on bed rest again, which was like the second or third time already in this pregnancy. And so they pumped me full of steroids that if the baby came, he'd have a better chance. And I did not give birth, but he was actually a week late. And so that was good. He came into the world healthy and on time, and it was an amazing experience. Very fast birth because I was already dilated, right? Before I went into labor, I was 3 centimeters dilated. So, the doctor is like, as soon as you feel the first thing, you get to the hospital because you're going to go into thundering labor, which is not two words that put in a sentence with labor that women want to hear. But that is what happened, and he was born in an hour and 20 minutes, or an hour and 40 minutes. I can't remember now, but it was really quick. And I had done a lot of praying while I was pregnant with him because my oldest son had been born with an immature digestive system. Now, if any of you know what that is, and if any of you have experienced that with any of your children, it's extremely difficult because the child always seems to have a bellyache and they just cry all the time. Not just cry, but scream and screech. And so it was a long, long, hard haul with him. He was about 18 months old the first time he actually slept through the night. And that's a whole nother story that was just very taxing, very difficult on our marriage because there was so many things I couldn't eat that bothered him that my diet being so restricted, I became vitamin deficient. And so I needed to go on these massive doses of vitamins for myself and for my own health. And so I did that. And I noticed the difference in the first week. I'm like, wow, I'm all of a sudden feeling so much better. This was great. And so there was a recovery time from that. And so when Jared was born, after he was born, I'm like, my life is complete. Everything is good. Everything is great. We're doing well. My husband had been working at, I think he was in car sales at that time, and he was not a good car salesman. So we never had any extra money because he tended to be very empathetic toward people when they came in. And so if you couldn't afford it, he didn't want to sell you the vehicle and he'd tell you why you shouldn't buy the vehicle. And so anyway, that didn't really work in our favor very well, but it was great for the people who were coming in to purchase a car. And anyway, long story short, we're moving forward. We're going through life. And at 48, I think it was 48, my husband had his heart attack. And my first husband, James, had his heart attack. And that was a very difficult time. Now, I'm going to run out of time again. And that's the problem when I do this. Excuse me. Because I want to give you a full picture, not just little droplets along the way. And so, maybe I will save that. I'll make this a 3-part instead of 2 parts. And I'll talk about some other important things that really happened along the way. And so my youngest son, both of my kids dance. They both did hip hop, and Jared did tap as well. Now, the thing is that Jared was very gifted in dance, very talented. He won a lot of scholarships. He won a lot of competitions. He made a lot of money. He did well for himself in dance, and there's the good things about that, and there's bad things about that. And some of the good things are that, it makes what you're doing that much more fun, and it was fun for him. It was fun for us, to be able to go and just to see the talent that he had. That was great. And so the bad thing about that is that there's other parents who get very upset. And I heard a lot of parents say really negative, mean things to me, and to Jared, just because he was talented. And I'm not going to go into that here, but it was the things that are said, the things that people say, man, it's crazy. And so one year in 2010, I was coming home from work in December, just before our 2 weeks off, and the Lord began to speak to me about what the next year was going to hold, and that it was going to change. It was going to hold change, and it was going to hold, I can't remember what else he said, but it was going to hold change, that there would be some good things and there would be some difficult things, but that I would endure. And so this is what he said to me on my way home that day. And so on January 6th, we'd gone back to work, just got back to work. January 6th, I was at work, and my husband came into the room early, came to pick me up, which he never does because he worked until 5 or 6 o'clock at night. So he came to my work to tell me that my father had passed away. And so I left work, went home, had to deal with a lot of things. I was an executor along with my younger brother. And so we were going back and forth to Saskatchewan all the time. Now I lived in Edmonton. So yes, without stopping at all along the way, it's about 6.5 hours. And but with stopping to eat, stopping to go to the washroom and stretch, it makes it about 8, 9 hours, right? And so we're driving this all the time. I'd pick him up in Calgary, and then we'd go off down to Saskatchewan. And so I call this year the rolling snowball from hell, because it's like everything was unleashed, and there was all these things that were going on. And like I said, Jared was a very good dancer. He was won a lot of scholarships. And so when we entered into this year, 2010, in the dance competition season, he was doing very well. He was winning scholarships. He was winning competitions, and he had trophies. But what was happening is that these things were being stolen. And so he was put into one category. His name is Jared, not Jaredina or Geraldine, but Jared, clearly a male name. And he was put into the wrong category in one competition that we were at. And although he had high score for the whole competition, he won nothing. And so he was 13 at the time. That's difficult, right? Like, you're like, okay, man, like, how do I tell this kid that, your stuff keeps getting stolen? So that was going on. And there was a lot of things that were going on, just the traveling back and forth and work, and there seemed to be strife on every side. At work there was, people that were, you're taking too much time off, and why is it taking so long, and you should be done this and everything by now. And I'm like, man, like, I have to go to Saskatchewan. Like, if I take 4 days off, you've got to understand, I'm only there for 2 days, right? So if I only take 3 days, I got a day, and then I'm coming back. So it's not as easy as you seem to think, right? So all of these things were going on. And then, so my youngest brother and I decided that what we were going to do is we were going to make my parents' house more sellable, I guess, to make it look better. So what we did is we took a whole bunch of stuff that had been upstairs, and we took it downstairs, and so that the upstairs would show better. We put everything into one bedroom in the basement. And we're like, okay, it's gonna show well. It'll sell now. So we just finished doing that, and there had just been so many things that had happened, and and I'm just like, I learned not to say what else can go wrong, because God will see that as a challenge and he'll make sure that you realize that if you open your mouth, that there's things that can happen. So I stopped saying that. I'm like, don't, it's not words to say. Don't challenge the Lord, and don't give the devil an opportunity, because something will happen. Because there had been so many things that had been going on. And so we came home, and we had just been home for a week. And during that week, I think it was at this time, or it was just a little earlier than that, that I was able to secure one scholarship that Jared had won. It had also been stolen, but I was able to find it somewhere at the competition. Long story, not going to get into that. But I get home, I do, and a week later, maybe a week later, a friend of mine sends me a picture and she goes, "Isn't this your mom and dad's street?" And there had been a flood. Now you need to understand that in the town that I grew up in, it rains maybe 3/4 of an inch a year. So for them to have a flood, highly unlikely. But here we are. And so I call my brother, and I said, did you see this? He goes, "Yes, I'm going to call the neighbor and I'm going to get him to go over and see what the damage is, or if there's any water in the basement." So the neighbor goes over to my parents' house and he calls Bruce back and he goes, "Yeah, there's 3 feet of sewage in the basement." And I'm like, great. And so I said, well, we go back down, we take everything out, we haul it all to the dump. Everything that we just taken down to the basement now has to be thrown out. So we take everything from the basement, we haul it to the dump, we get rid of everything. They come, they clean everything. My dad was a preservation officer, so he had many firearms in the basement. And so we come back to Maple Creek. I come back to Stony Plain. He comes back home. And he's decided he's going to go on a motorcycle ride. And I'm off to a scholarship in LA with Jared and my husband. And so we plan to do this 2 days before. So again, about a week, I'm ready to, we're packing up, getting ready to head out, getting everything in order. And my sister-in-law calls me and says that my brother had been in a motorcycle accident and he was in the hospital with internal bleeding, and they didn't know where it was coming from and they didn't know how it was going to turn out. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And he had broken his shoulder, or his collarbone. So I'm like, okay. And I said, do I go? Do I not go? What do I do? I didn't know what to do. And so she said, well, go. And if anything happens, you can just come back. And I'm like, oh, that didn't feel good, but I did. And so I go, and while we're in Los Angeles, I'm exhausted at this point. There's a 6.8 earthquake while we're there. We didn't know what it was because we live in Canada. We have no idea what an earthquake feels like or sounds like, and we didn't know. There on the wall in the hotel that we were at, it had a picture of, the words to tell you this is what a fire alarm sounds like. Well, that wasn't the alarm that was going on, so we had no idea what was going on. We heard kids screaming down the hallway, but we're at a dance convention, so of course there's kids screaming down the. We had no idea. My youngest son, he kind of stumbles into the bathroom and hits me, and I'm like, oh, weird, right? Like, I thought we'd just gotten too much sun. We'd been out by the pool. So I go to the window to look out the window, and I said, man, I must have had too much sun, because it feels like everything is going like this. Like, I'm getting close to the pool and far away, close to the pool and far away. We had no idea what had gone on. And so we get changed, we go downstairs, and everybody's like, oh, no, what happened was that there was a voice that came on the intercom and said, just to let you know, we've had a 6.7 or 8 earthquake, and they're going to be coming and they're going to be doing a check on our foundation to make sure that everything is okay. And we're like, oh, that's what that was, right? So we had no idea. There's an earthquake there. We get back, do the whole thing. Jared does very well. He wins the competition. We come back to Stony Plain, and my brother was doing fine. They found out what was going on, and they worked on him. He was doing well. He called me from the hospital to tell me we'd been gone about a week, and he called me a week and a half maybe, and he calls me to tell me And we just gotten home. Like we hadn't even unpacked the suitcases. We had come down. I decided I needed to have a cup of tea. Made a cup of tea. I was sitting down on the couch with my cup of tea, and my brother calls me to tell me that my mom and dad's house had been broken into, and it's now a crime scene. All the guns had been stolen, and it's now a crime scene. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I was so upset because now we're trying to sell the house, and now we can't sell the house because it's a crime scene. So we're like, great. And so here we are waiting for things to be resolved, and they never were. And so, is at this time I'm like, okay, what is going on? Like, this has just been a crazy 6 or 7 months, like just absolutely insane. And like, it seems like I called it the rolling snowball from hell for a reason, because every time I turned around, it seemed like there was something else that was going on. And so this is when I realized the Lord told me that there was actual witchcraft being prayed out against me. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, I'm going to need a little bit of confirmation on that. And so the next morning, I woke up and I'd gotten an email from somebody that I know, okay, like I know who they are. They know who I am. They had my email. And they sent me a message saying that they had been, I can't remember even how they had heard, but they had been somewhere and there had been this word that had been released, and my name came to their mind, and they had no idea what was going on in my life, but they felt that I would understand this word for myself. And I'm like, okay, so that's it. So then I had to learn, as I began to pray and call out to the Lord and say, how do I handle this? Like, what do I do? How do I handle actual real witchcraft, like from Wiccans being prayed out against me? I don't know how to do that. And so as he began to lead me through that by telling me that if rebellion is as witchcraft, then the best thing to do in order to protect yourself from witchcraft is to make sure that I only do what the Lord asked me to do. And so there was an extreme time of extreme obedience in everything, and to pray, that began praying the scripture at the word of the Lord. So I began to pray from the Psalms every single day, and just doing exactly what the Lord asked me to do, praying in the Spirit, doing that kind of thing. And so coming through that, I had learned a lot of things about how, when we're unguarded and when we're grieving, the enemy can bombard us and can hit us, and we can unknowingly open doors that can have repercussions not only on ourselves, but on our family as well. And so that is where I'm going to end today. And after this, I'm going to tell you the third part of my testimony. So I hope this encourages you. If you are in a situation where your life has been, it seems like a difficult struggle from birth, understand that God probably has a call on your life. Understand that God has something that he's doing in your life that the enemy doesn't want to have happen. There's many things in my story I have not talked about. Confrontations that I've had that I believed were demonic, and I do believe they were demonic, but to have these experiences happen in my life and know that God is in charge and God is in control is powerful. And you know what it did is it just drew me closer to him. It drew me closer to the throne. It drew me closer to a time when, God, I just want what you want. I want to do what you want me to do. That is because of who you are, not because of who I am. And so my reliance on the Lord just increased with everything that came my way. So be encouraged if you're in a difficult place. If you speak, if you cry out to the Lord, if you call out to him, if you pray, he will hear you, and he will lead you, and he will guide you, and he will direct you if you allow him to, if you trust him to do so. And then my only other thing on that is just do exactly what he tells you to do. And if somebody comes up to you and they know nothing of your situation, but they're able to speak into it, trust that that's the word of the Lord, and then do it. So be encouraged. I thank God for every one of you. God bless you as you wait for part 3.